sports talk radio in South Florida, you have to include this guy on the list. He 40 plus years. I worked with him for too brief of a period of time at WIOD, but guess who that guy might be? Take a guess. 40 years in radio. You can't miss him. He was I mean, always there on South Florida radio.
Like one of those voices you never forget.
Never forget.
I'd guess Defo.
Jeff DeForest. You got it, buddy. Jeff DeForest I mean, he has worked with everybody. You name it. Joe Rose, Dave Lamont, Steve Goldstein. I remember working with Goldstein on stations with friggin' fat Hank Goldberg. I mean,
Right.
imagine.
And I got a story about how I met Jeff. It was at the Silks Bar. And now the guy
Why
that
am I not
the
surprised?
Silks Bar at Gulfstream Park. This is
Okay.
probably like
Oh,
2006,
racing in a bar. What
So,
could
yeah,
possibly go wrong
and
there?
the only people that could sit at that bar are like the big heavy hitters, the guys that have the backside information and big time gamblers. And Fernando, he's since retired, but that guy was there forever. But that's how I first met Jeff DeForest
Yeah,
at
I
the
mean,
racetrack.
if you go to racetracks, you're going to run into Jeff at some point. But worked with him at WIOD, and now honored to have in Miami's Man Cave, Jeff DeForest. Jeff, how are you, buddy? How you doing today?
Great introduction, man. I don't know if I can live up to it here on the show. I hate to bring the Man Cave ratings down to 0.0, but
Yeah.
we've accomplished that in the past. Andy, good to see you, man. You look great. I love the setup you have. I have kind of a hostage video look to my podcasting and video streaming right now because I moved recently in the midst of a divorce, and I haven't figured out the correct lighting for the shot, and then B, to put in the because it's entirely different than what I was doing previously. So I apologize. If you see like the camera pull back and you see guys in ski masks with guns to my head, then I'm denouncing everything about America. That's what I'm doing on the show today. How are
Jeff,
you?
Jeff, that's what I'm talking about. When I did that introduction, you just gave a prime example of who Jeff DeForest was. I mean, really, in talk radio and sports talk radio, it was a lot of guys were, kind of in your face, kind of aggressive on the air. You were just humorous, conversational, welcoming. That's why people loved you so much on radio. But it's so good to have you in Miami's Man Cave. And again, thanks for joining us here.
It looks
No
like
problem
the
whatsoever.
arraignment cam he's on right now.
Yeah, it does.
The
It
arraignment
does.
cam.
And the way
We're
he
opening up the streets. We're opening up the
Right.
streets.
The only
Believe
difference
me.
is no orange.
and the way he just characterizes it, I could see the two guys coming in with the mask behind him.
Oh, that happened. My favorite example of that was when Hank Aaron was being carted around the country by Major League Baseball as they were waiting for him to acknowledge the greatness of the accomplishment of the steroid-induced Barry Bonds, whose head went from the size of a golf ball to a bowling ball, and then reversed back, which is amazing that your head could actually shrink during your lifetime. I mean, you might lose your hair, you might look a little thinner, but rarely does a head change shape. So
Yes.
Hank had every reason to believe that this was not conducted on the level, his home run chase. And sure enough, when they had Hank, he wasn't actually at the game when, but his record was broken when Bonds hit 755. And they did one of those videos on the big screen, wherever it was. It might have been Dodger Stadium, wherever they had Hank Aaron. And literally, they pulled back the cameras, and there were two guys in ski masks with machine guns that were being held to his head. So that image never left me. But yeah, it was always great. I mean, great run on the radio it was 40 plus years. Fortunately, the business, we'll probably get into this a little bit later on. I know you want to get into the Kentucky Derby, which lends itself to just absolutely classic stories. So, and this year, I don't think is going to be any different because it's a wide open race and it's the kind of thing that you love with all the gambling going on. I consider it, Andy, to be the greatest gambling opportunity that you could ever come across. You can be betting 20 teams, soccer parlays, all ties on FanDuel. They're sweeping your money off the board. They're passing out, instead of the bonus money now, they're giving out embalming fluid for you to gargle with. But you can make a score in the Derby, and I made several. So I love this. It's the Super Bowl of degeneracy for me. And in spite of the fact that it's also like a classic and a very dignified and meaningful race to all of the people that are involved in the sport. So it'll be a lot of fun discussing this. And of course, the radio wars were classic. And you and I both got to work with a lot of good people. You left out Sonny Hirsch, Rick Weaver, Hank, of course, was a classic. And the guy that got me into this thing by total accident was Joe Zagacki, who was WIOD is like Sonny's understudy. And one day he calls me out of nowhere. I was kind of down on my luck in the broadcasting business at the time and wondering if I needed to get like a waiter's job at Coral Gables somewhere. And I get a call from Joe Zagacki out of the blue, who I knew a little bit. And he says, we need another guy. We're expanding the pregame show from 2 hours to 3 hours, which eventually became four for the Dolphins and the Hurricanes. So he, I guess, had kicked up a little bit of a fuss, whatever impact he had with management. They actually acknowledged that he could go ahead and get another guy on a part-time basis. That turned out to be me, and that was the relaunch of my career in radio down here, which really I enjoyed not every minute of it. I mean, dealing with management was always yeah, kind of funky, but all of the people that we met, Andy, and you'll attest to this, what were for the most part absolutely great. Even the scumbags were cool. So it
Yeah,
was good.
yeah. They were cool in a scumbaggy sort of way, you know? It's just so
You
true,
understand?
though.
Yeah,
And you knew that they were screwing you somehow, but you still liked
yes,
them for some reason. You can't quite figure out why, you
yeah.
know?
That's
So
right there.
it started at WIOD at 610, and they started really sports talk in that station. I was there several years later after that, but they started that was your first really sports talk job, was at 610?
Well, I've been doing sports. I don't know if you remember a cat. This goes way back. A guy named Ron Harrison. He was originally out of
Oh,
Cincinnati,
Ron,
Ohio.
I worked with Ron at WINZ. Yeah, I remember Ron.
WNZ. That's where I got my start.
That's
Funny story there. I replaced Ed Berliner, who is still active in a lot of social media. The guy's got a tremendous voice, and I think
he does.
even Bob Costas has flubbed more words than Ed Berliner. I've never heard this guy flub a word. And he like does all this crazy stuff. He's still doing it. Very strong in that regard. But anyway, for some reason they hated Berliner at this radio station. It kind of worn out his welcome there. And I'd come in to substitute for him when I first moved to town. A couple of days, they used me a couple of days. They liked what I was doing. A couple of weeks later, I get a call, and they say, we're going to bring you in full time here. Now, I was in shock at what money they were offering, but I had no choice but to take the job. And so I was doing afternoon sportscasts under the auspices. Ron Harrison was the morning guy.
I
And the good thing
remember.
was, yeah, the good thing was he rarely showed up because he had a little bit of a drinking problem.
Yeah.
And he was coming from like Key Largo to this station in Carroll City. So it wasn't infrequent. In fact, it was almost a matter of routine. The phone would ring at my house at about 5 a.m. going, "Hey, can you come in? Ron can't make it today." And I loved it, of course, because I was making extra money and I really needed it. And Ron was the king, the undisputed king of the live broadcast commercial.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know
Yeah.
how effective these things can be. And nobody did it better. I mean, this guy is selling like land in North Carolina on AM Drive morning radio. And people
Yeah,
are
and the
buying it,
and
man,
and
as if
the
he was Eric
interesting
Estrada. We're talking about places in Arkansas.
Oh, no, I was I was in the sales department at WINZ in 94.9 Zeta, Zeta 94, as you recall.
Yes,
And
I was on there
and
too for about a year.
Yeah, and Ron was the king of that, but at the gas station at the old ranch in Carroll City, then Carroll City, now it's Miami
Yes.
Gardens, the old ranch there was a gas station with a convenience store down the street, and it had the Ron Harrison special there, which were 2 Old Milwaukee long neck beers and a beef jerky for like $1.99 or something.
And they had
It
those
was
pictures. He had the
classic.
greatest hair. He had great television
Yes,
hair. It was Jimmy Johnson before Jimmy was Jimmy. Slick back, not quite as. I mean, Jimmy's hair definitely was more distinctive, but
yes,
you couldn't
yes.
miss Ron. He was a great guy. I mean, he had a tragic ending
Great
there. He
guy.
committed suicide, which
Yes.
obviously I don't know. You know how much influence the alcohol had on an impact on his life. But I saw him shortly before he did that. I went down to the Keys with my son, and Ron was entertaining us because we needed a place to launch our wave runners. And he was starting to tell some stories that made you wonder, like, is this guy okay? Uh,
Yes.
I mean, he claimed to be like a CIA agent, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he said, I was working for the CIA the whole time I was at 940 Winds. Said, "No, Ron, I didn't know that. I thought you were working for Johnny and Mac by the railroad track." Which,
Well, I don't know if you know this, but he was a police officer in Ohio
yes,
before he got in
yeah,
broadcasting. You might recall that. So who
yeah,
knows,
a lot of
right?
stuff going on, but these were characters, man, and that's kind of what made the whole thing great. You were probably a salesman with Larry Kent, who
Yeah,
pronounced his name
yeah,
Lowry Kent. It was like
yeah.
Lowry, Lowry, but no, it was a lot of fun. It was great, and I got involved
And
after
then I
940
was
in
my
TV.
only the only thing that bummed me out, Jeff, was that when you left WIOD, I had just became a manager there. It was really my first management job in radio. And within a year, maybe less, you went to WQAM. But that was a great gig. Morning
Yeah,
drive with was that the gig with Joe Rose
yeah, that
and
was with Joe and
Cindy?
Steve, the first team, and people still come up to me. It wasn't my favorite show to be on, to be honest with you, Andy. I've had other shows that I enjoyed being on a lot more, but
Right.
it was very successful. I don't know how it worked because there was a lot of tension there in the beginning. There was a lot of ego involved, and I was like the new guy, and I wasn't necessarily welcomed in as warmly as one would anticipate because I'm usually pretty cooperative with people. I try to be. I mean, I feel good about that. I guess the test would be that people years later still like you, which is always nice. But yeah, it was great. We did that for about 6.5 years, and then they screwed it up. Not those guys, but of course, management
Well,
got
that was
involved.
that was when but that wasn't really a big company. That was under what, Beasley or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. A fly
Yeah.
by night company. They went public. They buried a lot of people. They made us buy the stock. I bought it one day and I sold it the next, and I still lost like 3 grand. So it was all part of the fun of the business. But yeah, I always ended up usually at the station that was happening at the time, or carried the right franchises. So that was a very fortunate part of my run in radio, and I got to do a lot of things I never would have anticipated being able to do, and often dreamt about doing, like calling games at Madison Square Garden, going all over the country, traveling with the Dolphins and the Hurricanes. So couldn't have asked for anything much better. And I actually left radio briefly to do horse racing. So I don't know if you wanted to get into the Derby, but yeah,
Well, I do wanna
it's
ask you one other
terrific.
question I
Sure.
do wanna ask you one other question. Who who might have been the biggest jerk, the biggest asshole that you worked with in radio? I mean,
Wow, big
if you don't
ass.
wanna say a name, give us a station maybe that person was in, and then we could kinda guess.
You know what's funny, Andy? I always try to do, like you mentioned, I always try to do like somewhat creative things because people always talk about radio and theory as being theater of the mind. So, I heard this from somebody or read it somewhere a long time, ago that you have to try to consider what's coming through the speakers. Like, what is the guy hearing? And if I'm in my car, I'm driving to my miserable job, I'm going to be hanging. Not that any job is bad, but you're not happy about it. You just had a fight with the wife. What's going to come through the speakers that's actually going to be pleasing? Two guys screaming at you. I can't believe the Mets had a guy strike out, or somebody that's doing something a little bit different. And I started, and you're seeing Howard Stern get tremendous traction with these interviews. They're fantastic that he does with various musicians now. I don't know if you've seen
Love
this
'em.
system.
Oh, I don't
Pretty
miss one. I don't miss one.
fantastic. Yeah, you know who else is actually very good with these musician interviews is Dan Rather has a series out there that is absolutely fantastic
Really?
as well. But anyway, I'm friends with a lot of musicians here because I go to a lot of live shows. I'm going to one tonight, maybe with a first time starter, as they say in horse racing. I'm going to meet this woman who I've never met before, kind of a blind date through like,
Oh,
well, things, Facebook dating. And I'm just taking a shot here. And I'm hoping that she's cool enough that I want to bring her to the Tipperary pub where they'll have some good live music tonight, but a lot of people would never walk into this place. So
gotcha.
we'll see what happens. But I've got to be friends with a lot of local musicians. You mentioned Tobacco Road. A lot of those guys got their start there, including my buddy Albert Castiglia, who's making it big right now with Bill Murray and the Blood Brothers.
Right,
Many
right.
others started at Tobacco Road. In fact, Graham Wood Drought, who I recently saw him in a friend of mine's backyard playing a show. I think the place is called the Fish House in Dade County, and they put on some shows there with some really, really, quality professional musicians. So there is some good stuff going on live, even though there was nothing like Tobacco Road because it was kind of like every night. It was great. So
Yeah.
I used to bring these guys onto my show, especially it was great if they also knew a little bit about sports, which certain guys did. Alpha Castillo is a huge sports fan. A couple of other guys that I had on, and they would bring their guitars and whatever they could acoustically and play live music on the AM radio. Now think about that. If I'm in my car, I try to, sort of get a picture of this for people. And if I'm in my car and I hear like a guy like JP Soares, a local musician of great distinction, and he's playing some stuff on an acoustic guitar and using that voice that sounds like Tom Waits, I'm thinking, what the hell is this? This is great. And sure enough, you know how this goes with program directors. They come running down the hall, and I would say you mentioned biggest asshole. I don't know that I would put this person in that category, but certainly very anti-DeForest and any creativity that I was, trying to bring about on the show. And she would come running down the hall with a sledgehammer, ready to break the glass, saying, "If you don't get these guys off this show right now," and as I look back on it, Andy, I think this was some of the greatest stuff I ever did. I mean, we had a concert series going on AM radio, and we did it about once a month. And I enjoyed it as much as, I mean, you know how when you're sitting there listening to somebody else and you just have a smile on your face? That's how it was. And yet, the people, the powers that be, they got really nervous if you went over over the edge. And
Well,
unfortunately,
that was probably when you worked, like, you had an 11-year stint at WINZ at Sports Talk 940. That was, you really controlled your content completely, right?
yeah, they didn't bother me, but they hated me at the same time. I was still in my own time too, which you can appreciate, which is a trick I learned from a guy way back in the day in California when I was out in California. We were selling high school football on a religious radio station in Corona, California,
Oh, God.
KREL, which is another great radio story because it was the first time I got fired in radio. General manager calls us in. I was doing a sports talk show like maybe midnight to 2 in the morning with this guy, and we were selling it ourselves. We were buying the time on the station. Guy calls us in and says, listen, Bob, and the guy's name was Bob Harvey. He says, Bob, Jeff, I got to let you guys go. We said, what do you mean? I thought we were doing really well. He says, well, you're doing okay, but you're getting buried in the ratings. I said, by who? He says, by Catherine Coleman. I said, Catherine Coleman, man, she's like the number one, broadcasting evangelist at the time when this was sort of mostly a radio thing. You had Ernest Angley on TV, but Coleman dominated any kind of station that carried this kind of stuff. So we said, well, what's wrong with losing to Catherine Coleman? If we're second to Catherine Coleman, that should be pretty good. And he looks at us and he goes, she's been dead for 5 years. And that's a true story.
You lost to a dead woman. Oh
We're
my God.
getting clobbered in the ratings by a dead woman. So
Oh my God. Oh my God.
sure.
That's great. So what station was that? You said a woman
So
came on.
KRE, yeah.
No,
Oh,
no,
was that not-
no. The station in Miami that
Yeah, that's
that
940.
that
Grace
was not,
Blaze, the program
oh,
director. She
yeah, because
followed in.
Peter Bolger there was great. Did you work with Peter or no?
No, never. I had a bunch of clandestine meetings with Peter. He was very much by the book, this guy. And he would look at me and he would say, he would call for a meeting. We'd meet at some obscure place like that nobody ever ate at. And
Everything
'cause
was a
nobody,
big secret. Every meeting was always a big secret, you know?
right, like everybody at the station knew Bulger's going to meet DeForest today, but we had to meet in some cow pasture somewhere in Davie, at the Bergeron rodeo grounds or something and have a hot dog.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
and he would look at me and he was always very gracious to me, a big fan. And he would say, are you currently under contract? I'd say, yeah, you know that, Pete. And he would immediately walk out. I was like, I drove 45 effing minutes to get out here and you're going to walk out on me? Because
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't walk out. He'd run out with his hands over his face so no one took a photo of him. I mean, he was nuts about that shit, you know?
oh, God. I mean, look, of course you're under contract. You're still at the station. What are you going to be? I mean, you're not there
Did
as a
you
freelance.
did you not hear me on the air this morning? Okay, what do you think?
I did a show this morning. I mentioned I was meeting you. I hope that was okay.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
good
great.
show with you, Andy, man. We could go on this stuff forever.
Oh,
But it's just,
forever. forever. Let's talk a little Derby because
Oh,
when I thought Tommy and I were in here last week in Miami's Man Cave, and we were talking about, he brought up the Derby. I'm actually going to Atlanta this weekend to visit my cousin. And the first thing she said to me was, my cousin Wendy, she said, tell Rebecca to bring a big hat because we're going to a Derby party. You know, in the South, that's a big
oh, nice,
thing,
yeah.
right?
And it's huge
So
everywhere.
it's huge everywhere. But we thought we got to call Jeff. Here's the first thing. I know nothing about horse racing. I'm not a big, so I'm going to ask you maybe some dumb questions. But the one thing that did enthrall me, and I want your opinion on it, is this Japanese horse that runs the other direction, now is running this direction. And I
Yeah.
ran into a guy today. Interestingly enough, I had Comcast in my office because we're trying to move this into a space in my office in downtown South Miami. And he's from Kentucky. So I mentioned the Derby and he goes, let me tell you, he goes, that horse is going to go 10 seconds faster when it goes in the other direction. He had this whole theory about it,
Yeah. I don't
I
believe that.
don't,
I mean, yeah.
I don't
I'm
know
not
about that.
subscribing to that theory. I mean, we've had European horses that have been racing in a different direction. I don't know that that helps them any. I mean, think about it. If you're used to running backwards, all of a sudden you're running forwards. Maybe that would make a difference. But when you're a slow horse, you're not going to win the Kentucky Derby no matter what direction they're going in. I would think it would be more of an impediment than an advantage. But yeah, I mean, there's so many theories about it. I have a tendency to put a line right through the Japanese horses. There've been some Japanese horses of late that have been getting considerable attention going into the Derby, and all the wise guys are saying, "Oh yeah, watch out for the Japanese horse." It's an immediate. I don't know if you remember the movie Let It Ride with Richard Dreyfuss. It was actually
Yeah.
shot at Hialeah Park, and,
Yes.
and the town
Yes.
would come over to Richard Dreyfuss and say, "I love the 8 ball in here." And Richard would turn to as the actor he was in a movie. Richard Dreyfuss would turn to his guy that was walking around with him, and as soon as the guy walked away, he'd go, "Put a line through the 8." Because I figured the touts know nothing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that any amount of inside information is necessarily going to help you here, but it is worthwhile to formulate your own opinions. And I believe the best part of the race, you mentioned the hats. I haven't been to Churchill Downs. I went to the Derby a couple of times, and I really enjoy going to in Lexington, Kentucky, Keeneland Racecourse, which is sort of a sister to Churchill, but only races 6 weeks a year. And the thing you will notice, Andy Corge, I don't know. I mean, you've been fighting attached for a long time. So being a single guy, you will never see a collection of more beautiful women. Even the women, I don't know. There had to be a movie somewhere where the line was even the ugly chicks look good. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning at some bar back in the day when you mentioned, that there was a certain substance floating around Miami that was very prevalent.
Oh yeah,
It's,
especially in the
and
radio business.
any business, it seemed like. But
Yeah, yeah, it was.
and it's a thing. She's what is it? A 2 at 10 and 10 at 2.
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, every woman looks great when you're walking around the Derby, and hats are significant. Guys are even wearing like complete replicas of the Churchill Downs twin spires and grandstand on their head. It's really phenomenal from a festivity standpoint. So that's part of the fun. But the trick is this, Andy, with all the gambling that's going on, this is absolutely 1,000% the Super Bowl of degeneracy, where you will never ever have a better opportunity to make money than you will on a Kentucky Derby for a lot of reasons. You have people that never bet horse racing, like you say yourself. This is the only time they bet all year. Do they
Yeah.
have any particular insight? Now, there's beginner's luck, there's blind luck, no doubt about it. And maybe you're better off not knowing anything. And there's certain
Well,
people
Jeff,
yeah.
just to interrupt you for a second. After he told me that, I immediately went to Hard Rock Bets and put 50. I saw 30 to 1 and I go, oh my God, I'm going to bet $50 on that horse.
I'm
Right.
going to cancel that ticket. I wouldn't, though. I mean, you should. Yeah. I might have booked that for you, Andy.
Uh,
Look, you have to use bombs in the Kentucky Derby. By bombs, I mean long shots and horses that look. Most of the horses in this race are going to be double digits or better, and that's in terms of odds. And that's the great thing about it is that you won't see a horse that's won like 2 stakes races in a row go off at 25 to 1 unless you're watching the Kentucky Derby or maybe some of the Breeders' Cup races. So great opportunity here, especially if you have an opinion. And if you don't, and you're just taking a blind shot, you have a chance to make enormous scores. I would say two of the three biggest tickets I've ever cashed in my life were in the Kentucky Derby. So,
Well, with
and
this
I
with this with this year's field, you have Renegade. I guess Renegade would be the favorite. I don't know. I'm looking.
favorite is 4-1. Yes,
Yeah.
lukewarm favorite.
So favorite, but on the one position, is that you think that's
That's a
good?
coffin. Yeah, yeah. They put the nail in the coffin.
I
Todd
think
Pletcher, the
so.
trainer, Todd Pletcher, the trainer of Renegade. Renegade is very highly regarded by everybody, and of course, accommodated and indicated by the fact that this horse was the 4-1 favorite. Was coming off a series of really good performances, including, I believe, the Arkansas Derby. What was his meal ticket to get to the Kentucky Derby? And he looked great there. But the one hole hasn't won, hasn't come home first in 40 years.
Yeah.
The last horse to win out of the one block was Ferdinand, trained by the late great Charlie Whittingham, who was one of the real classic trainers out of California. And Ferdinand, I believe, won the 1986 Kentucky Derby from the one hole. And Pletcher
In a in a
was
in a field of how many?
probably 20. I mean,
Oh,
it's
okay.
almost always a full field there in the Derby, if not. I mean, maybe some late scratches knock it down to a couple less, but the problem is there's incredible activity. I mentioned like it's kind of like an MMA fight. I was on another show, and it's sort of like I mean, there's so much bumping and tussling that goes on, especially in the early stages. That if you get buried in on the rail out of the one hole, you have little chance to navigate all of that traffic and get around into a winning position. So chances are you're going to come off the rail and be like 5 wide going for home. Obviously, extremely difficult. 40-year gap is a long gap. It's almost like the Dolphins winning a playoff game. Where, you know,
Exactly. 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 So Jeff, I'm Richard Dreyfuss. I'm
yeah,
standing here in Miami's man cave. You walk by. Tell me, which one should I not cross off my list?
I'm looking at a few horses in this race. A friend of mine is pretty good on a Derby. He likes a horse. Bill Mott's been having tremendous success as a trainer, but his son Riley Mott is running a horse called Incredibolt out of the 11 hole. So I'm definitely using that horse in my equation. I don't know if I'm going to throw Renegade out completely. I know the Florida Derby horses are getting good consideration. They're both like 6-1, or one's 6-1, one's 8-1. Commandment, Brad Cox trained Louis Saez. Louis Saez has to make amends for getting disqualified on maximum security, which is one of my favorite Derby stories, and led to the biggest payoff I ever got in a Kentucky Derby when maximum security was taken down on a jockey objection. And this was the 2019 Kentucky Derby. So has it really been 7 years since I cashed this ticket? I think so. Anyway, we happen to like this bomb named Country House. So we use them. And the way I approach this, and this is maybe getting a little sophisticated if you're not a big bettor, but you can make what's called a trifecta box, where you have to pick the first 3 finishers in order. This to me is where the biggest value is in the race. Trifecta box. Win, yes, of course, if you catch a 50-1 shot and you got $100 on it, that's a great payoff. But if you can somehow catch a 3-horse trifecta box, that's going to cost you $6 to bet. So you can throw in
Is
2.
that your bookie calling right now?
I don't know where my phone is going off. I mean, this thing never rings. But yeah, all of a sudden I'm very popular and I don't know how to shut it off. I'm going to
I
shut this
hope
phone.
that's not the same. I hope that's not the same bookie that broke Sid Rosenberg's legs. Okay.
Well, he was threatening to. Obviously, Sid survived, but the circumstances were not particularly flattering for Sid at that point. But anyway, so my buddy likes Country House. I'm going partners with a guy. We're going to bet 100 apiece into the race. Nothing big, right? We're going to be betting other races on the card and other races around the country. But we're going to each plant $100, one stick into the Kentucky Derby. So we've been following this horse, Country House, for a while, and I had to go and convince the guy I was betting with to use him in our 5-horse box. Now, the 5-horse trifecta box will cost you $60. It's a $1 5-horse trifecta box. And the way it works, Andy, And Tommy is that Tommy probably knows this because he's a
Yep.
degenerate still, drinking margaritas there at
Right.
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But
I'm like the guy asleep in the review for the test.
Yes, he is.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're cheating off the redheaded girl with the freckles on the SATs and trying to get into
Exactly.
some community
Always
college
go for
somewhere.
the girl with the freckles every time.
Anyway, so now you get 2 throwouts in the 5-horse trifecta box. I tried to shut this thing off completely, but I failed to do that. Excuse my technical ineptitude, as evidenced by the
That
background here.
It's okay. That's okay.
Okay, all right, we should be good to go now. So you have 2 throwouts, and you could have if you have the top 3 finishers among these 5 in any order, you are a winner. You're going to be cashing
Wow.
a trifecta ticket, which is always going to pay significantly, even if it's the 3 top choices in this race. I mean, you're looking at morning line wise, 4-1 and 2 6-1 shots. That try is going to pay something. If you can get and connect with any bomb, and especially if Renegade's not on the ticket, you're going to get an enormous payoff. So what happens in this race in 2019? I convinced my buddy to use Country House. He's looking at me with that look, Andy, kind of like the program director when I had the live bands in there. Like, are you going to continue to do this crap?
One of those.
And and we had 4 other horses, one of which was Maximum Security. So they crossed the wire. Maximum Security wins. Country House miraculously runs second at 50-1, and we have the 3rd and the 4th place finishers inside of this box. Now, this never happens in the Derby. The inquiry sign is posted. I don't even think it was an inquiry. I believe it was a jockey's objection, which is, I mean, kind of like, the weakest guy and weakest voice in the room raising his hand in a meeting and says, are you guys interested in my suggestions? Everybody's like, no, get that out of here. Right. So, jockey's objection usually ignored. There had never been a horse disqualified via steward's inquiry or jockey's objection, I believe, in the history of the race. And Maximum Security was a very popular choice because he was the favorite in the race. So the majority of people wanted him to stay up there as a winner. So this foul occurs somewhere, the potential foul occurs somewhere that would have seemed inconsequential to the final result. But nonetheless, the stewards look at this thing for a half an hour. So I'm holding a winning ticket either way. If they leave Maximum Security as the winner, I'm going to cash a ticket for $3,000. With my buddy. So we're going to get 1,500 a piece out of our 100. Nothing wrong with that, 15-1. And we had a lot of fun watching the race. But sure enough, we were looking, and the inquiry involves impeding 2 horses that finished off the board. So if Maximum Security gets found sort of guilty of this infraction, then they're taking him off the board and off the ticket, which was beneficial to us because if he's out of there, it's going to pay an enormous prices compared to what would have happened if he had been second in the race or won the race. And sure enough, after like a half hour, they take him down. We still have the winning trifecta ticket with our 5-horse box, $11,000 for $1. So that was great. I mean, and that's part of the fun of the Derby. That's my first move. If you were handicapping, pick 5 horses out, even if you pick them out by colors, and spend the $60 and have them boxed in a 5-horse trifecta box. And then just cross your fingers and hope the gods of gambling are on your side, which they have been at different times in the Derby.
Well, that sounds like a good plan for me.
I
Now
don't know
I know
that
nothing about handicapping. That's my
There's no
problem.
handicap, I mean, you can do a little. Obviously, it's better if you do a little handicapping and have an opinion because you want to bet your opinion. That's the only reason to really be betting. I mean, and whoever else is telling you to bet a horse, like I said, put a line through it because almost routinely.
I wish I had remembered that movie the way you did when the guy, the Comcast guy came by and told me about the Japanese horse running 10 seconds faster when he goes the other way. But
He probably wins that.
I don't know. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
In any sport, the backstory always intrigues me. And in horse racing, I see when I looked at the list, I see Baffert, the trainer, on 2 horses in this Derby.
Yeah,
And
both bombs.
right. And I wonder, like, the whole thing about the doping, when was that, in like 2021?
A couple of years ago, yeah, a few years ago.
Yes. And he got banned from the Derby for several years. I
Yes,
think last year it might have been his first year back. I mean,
I believe so, yes.
how do you think the gamblers, you being as you call it, a degenerate gambler, how do you
Mhm.
think that the gamblers treat somebody like that, or
Like
the
Baffert?
other the other trainers, the other jockeys, what do you think?
Oh,
How do
yeah.
you
Well,
think that
look, guys have used buzzers. They're always looking for an edge. There are, various drugs involved. Sometimes infinitesimal amounts turn up positive tests, and trainers get suspended. But depending on your level of prestige, you know how it is. I mean, they're ever going to call Michael Jordan for walking? No. I mean, the guy
right,
takes 16 steps to the basket. It's like, and then they call a foul on a guy who had no choice but to tackle him because he never dribbled a basketball. So you're always going to see some kind of favorable treatment. Baffert has been suspected of things. His excuse probably was the lamest I've ever heard in my life in terms of any kind of illegal doping, whether it was steroids in baseball. "Oh, I had no idea it was steroids. Or they got a lip balm. In boxing, you got Canelo Alvarez. He supposedly had a taco somewhere in LA and ended up testing for massive amounts of testosterone, but had no idea that this is what was happening. But when Baffert claimed that a groom had pissed on the hay in a stall, and you mentioned you had a converted horse stall.
yeah,
So
yes.
Baffert's excuse was for this positive test that there was a groom that had used some kind of medication, cough medication, peed on the hay that this horse was, about to consume, and
Wow.
that's how the ingestion of the illegal substance came into the horse. You had to say, "Holy Melania Trump!" I mean, what are you talking about here? You never know Epstein. I mean, look, I'll give you a funny story. I'm exaggerating to make a point here, but so I'm at Del Mar with my friends, and we're going to meet some guys at this Italian restaurant that a guy, good friend of mine named Todd Schrupp, who was the main anchor on FanDuel TV up until very recently when they decided they were going to fire everybody. But he started there as a young guy who was originally on the network 26 years, rose to being kind of the face of the network, much like Rich Eisen is the face of the NFL network, that kind of thing in a niche sport. And he recommends an Italian restaurant to us. So we meet him at this Italian restaurant in San Diego and outside of Del Mar. And Bob Baffert and his wife Jill are waiting for their car when we get there in a valet parking. And Jill goes to her purse to reach for a tip. And I believe 6 syringes fell out of her purse. So, what are you doping? I don't know. What do you think, Andy? But,
Oh,
yeah, just stash them in the wife's purse, and you won't have any problem when you go meet
oh
the
my
stewards.
God. Well,
It was my
horse racing has always kind of had that reputation,
yeah,
right? The dogs even worse. I mean,
dogs are bad.
I would hear stories about the dogs getting doped, but
Yeah,
but it's always been the case, and I guess it's what makes it even a little intriguing for some people is you know that whole thing about, I mean, did you ever go to the track and someone came to you and said, hey, I understand horse number 6 has gotten a shot?
the juice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it at different levels too. I mean, it's not just necessarily illegal drugs. When I was doing between my gig there with Ron Harrison and getting on WIOD, I was doing horse racing on TV, as I mentioned, on what was originally Sunshine Network. Now that's a branch of FanDuel TV. And I'm on the backstretch. We were doing a lot of feature stories on horses on the backstretch at Calder Racecourse at the time. And there was a horse that was going to be 3 to 5 in the morning line, prohibitive odds. I mean, destined to win, and a horse that you probably would never bet. Maybe a key him on top at some exotics, but I'm not betting any money on 3 to 5 shots just in a straight win bet. And we're doing a story about the track veterinarian. So the veterinarian happens to be working on this horse the day before he was going to race. And he shows us, demonstrates to us what kind of pain this horse was actually in. And he said, this horse could barely stand up in its stall. And you're looking at that going, well, if you're on the backside and you knew that, of course, he ran off the board the next day at 3 to 5, no matter what treatment they gave him. And I'm sure, they might have jacked him with some kind of painkiller or whatever that
Had
they
to.
give horses. Some of this stuff is legal. A lot of it isn't. And they did their best to get this horse out there to race. And you knew if you saw this horse the day before, literally, he was an absolute cripple. And so if you have that kind of inside information, it's good. There have been all kinds of different things with trainers, though, Andy, over the years where there was a guy named Frank Passaro at Gulfstream Park many years ago who was winning every race, every race. I mean, he had like a 50% winning percentage, which is ridiculously high for any trainer. Normally, if a trainer wins 25% of his races, he's a king of the mountain, as Bob Baffert. And it turned out that the trainer, his method was he was rubbing cayenne pepper on the genitals of the male horses. And for some reason, inexplicable reason, I mean, you talk about JFK Jr. type of science. Uh, this had an impact on horses running faster. And he was
Well,
winning every race.
listen, Jeff, you put cayenne pepper on my balls, I'm gonna be running super, super fast, okay? I mean, come
I
on.
was in the men's room at that point. You know?
I'm dumping right in the pool. I'm running to the pool, in the pool, baby.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, we trust everything in sports for the most part, even though we know that there's a lot of illegal crap going on. So,
Yes.
look, if
And
you're a
I
horse racing fan,
remember
you know what happens.
and I remember when talking about illegal stuff going on or shady stuff in sports. I remember when I worked with you for a short period of time, they were trying to like modernize everything you guys talked about on the air. And you kept talking about boxing and MMA was just coming around. Do you remember that? And they kept
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
you, no, no boxing. But
No box.
talk about a sport where you have that sort of veil over it, where, is this guy, is he falling down? You always question how fragile someone's jaw might really be, that
Yeah.
sort of
And that's why I was always attracted to those sports since my earliest memories. I love boxing and I love horse racing. Actually, at WIOD, they weren't as discouraging about that. I had some of my greatest shows with boxers that came to the studio. And one, a couple I'll never forget. I had Joe Frazier, Smoking Joe Frazier, comes to the
Wow.
studio to do an hour interview show with me as part of a 2-hour Sports Talk 610. Smoking Joe Frazier. And if he hadn't brought his
how old was he? How old was he when he came into the studio? He was retired, right?
well, he was retired, yeah, and his brain wasn't in the greatest of shape at that point. He actually seemed to recover a little bit to be more understandable, but you could barely make out a word that he was saying, unless he was singing. He had like a Mel Tillis thing going where he had his own band, and when I asked him to sing, he sounded great. But when he was just answering my questions and telling stories, he had no idea what he was talking about. Except he brought his son Marvis Frazier to the station, and Marvis basically interpreted for us. And the other time I had an interpreter in play, this was great.
Crazy.
When it happens, you break out in a sweat, like you get one of those flop sweats, where my friend convinces me that Roberto Duran, the great Roberto Duran, speaks English and is more than willing to come to the studio for an hour and do an hour talk show with calls and everything and speak English on the show. So, sure enough, he comes. It's Roberto Duran. He was already retired, but not out of the ring that long. And he's got a couple of people with him. And I asked him, so Roberto, great to have you on the show. How you doing? Thanks so much for doing this. And he looks at me and he goes, "Que pasa?" I'm like, oh, and he uses a little 4-letter word. Shit, this guy's not going to speak any English. So now I'm stuck. I got Roberto Duran in here for an hour, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do? This guy's not going to speak any English. Now, one of the guys.
Have an interpreter? You didn't have an interpreter or anything?
I wasn't expecting it, but fortunately, he brought a guy that was bilingual with him. Brought him to the studio. And then I'll tell you, I have never in my lifetime been flooded with more phone calls on a show than when we opened up the phones to a guy who was speaking Spanish on an English speaking station, with people asking Roberto Duran questions in both English and Spanish and having them interpreted through this other person. Which, is interesting.
Well, think about that. I mean, that's quite a radio show, Jeff. I mean, you have Roberto Duran answering questions from people calling in. That's what I miss.
Yeah.
Today's radio is just not kind of that way. You know what I
They would
mean?
never do that. Yeah.
No, never, never.
Yeah,
I
Jeff,
still
didn't
consider
you?
myself. I was just getting started as a sports talk guy too. IOD was a pretty prestigious job. I mean, Sports Talk
Very.
610 was the only sports talk. I went
And
to
it
6 to
wasn't
8
it
every
last
day.
year? Wasn't it last year you had the Kentucky Derby winning jockey on your show for an
I was
interview, the
doing,
Italian kid?
Yeah. Umberto Rispoli.
Yeah.
Rispoli. Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky in the sport, and that's one of the great things about covering racing and boxing is you really get close to the people, and they will bend over backwards to accommodate if they can. I had a show I just rambled for 45 minutes right before I came on with you guys, which is probably while I'm still rambling. But I was supposed to have a great guest on, and he had to scratch at the last minute. and I called like 3 other people this morning, and they all, no matter what they were doing, they said, "Hey, listen, if it wasn't for this, I mean, I would be there 100% for you, DeForest." And that's great. And boxing was always the same way for me because we had one of the better times I had too. I don't know if you remember these two guys. Also in the studio at WIOD, I had at the same time 2 former heavyweight champions, Jimmy Ellis and Pinklin Thomas.
Oh my
And they
God.
both came on the show. I had met them at some banquet I was at with there was a guy here that I met when I first came to town named Hank Kaplan. He was a boxing historian, and he was one of the great characters that you meet in the sport. He had everything. He had like a museum in his house of clips and this and that. And so he was holding some function, and I met Ellis and Thomas there. I asked them if they'd be willing to come to the studio that night, and they said yeah. And it was one of the funniest shows I was ever on. Both those guys were just absolutely fantastic. So people
Thomas,
underestimate how
Thomas,
entertaining these guys can
Thomas,
be.
Thomas lived in Broward County, didn't he? Thomas is from down
He
there.
might have, yeah. I don't know where they were coming from, but I just was going through some stuff I threw into storage, and I came across a picture of a young DeForest in a coat and tie, and with Jimmy and Franklin Thomas
Wow,
at this
that's
event.
great.
And yeah, it's a freaking classic. But
That
yeah,
is
those
that
two
is
sports.
cool.
I mean, horse racing is great like that. Like I said this morning, I called guys I never even spoke to before. That my friend had given my the heads up that I'd be calling, and they all were like, yeah, I would definitely do it. So I always love covering those two sports for that reason.
Yeah, well, listen, man, once you pay an athlete 40, 50, 60 million a year, their whole mind changes. Football players, basketball players, the hockey players used to be very approachable. Now that I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm not in the business anymore, but now they're not that probably as approachable as they used to be. They at least were known for being more approachable, but they're making all that money. They don't give a shit. I mean, come on, you know?
Yeah, it was great when they were promoting the Panthers when they first came on the scene. I remember, what is it, Beach Place in Fort Lauderdale,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the Beezer was making an appearance. So I was supposed to do something there, being the radio guy that was accompanying him. And I pull up in the parking lot, and I'm looking. There literally was a line like for like 3 miles to get the Beezer's autograph. He was so popular when he was here. But these guys were very accommodating. I recently had an interview on one of my streaming shows with Scott Millenby, and he couldn't have been any more engaging in terms of a conversation about hockey and what was going on, not just with the franchise, the Panther franchise, and the history going back to that great team in what was that, 96, 97,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
when they went to the Stanley Cup Finals and Patrick Waugh ended up stonewalling them, that was a classic battle with the Bees. It was 1-0 in overtime. And
yes.
was it Ulf Samuelsson that scored that goal? The guy that never scored a goal. All of a sudden, the end of that game, the Panthers got swept, but everybody got
Wow.
swept up in the enthusiasm. That was a great year in South Florida sports. Remember driving down 95, Annie? Well, you probably were driving up 95 to get these arenas, but and everybody
Yeah,
got
no,
flags.
actually, you were driving south. Back then, they were playing here in downtown Miami, as you
Yeah.
would recall. So yeah, I remember that series very well. And they always are more approachable than the football players, the basketball players. There's a certain arrogance about them now. I went to a Miami Heat game recently. I didn't even recognize it as a sporting event. Honestly, I hate to say it, but I didn't. I was down low. Someone invited me. It was like a party down there. I'm like, is there a game going on in all this somewhere? I don't, it's crazy. I,
They bombard you with the noise. I mean, the decibel levels
yes.
you can't believe. Nothing against DJ Irie. I'm sure he's a fine person, but seems to be dedicated and devoted to some charitable efforts.
Hey,
But
hey, Jeff, don't date yourself because DJ
he's been
Irene,
gone for a while. Yeah.
I think he's been gone for 10, 15 years probably by now.
He's not dead as long as he's still with us. That's good.
Right,
Yeah, but
exactly.
I mean, I grew up. Look, being an old bastard that I am. You went to the game to hear the squeaking of the Converse All Stars on the floor there.
Exactly.
The Celtics took. I mean, I wanted to hear Hondo Havlicek in those low cut. Converse. Chuck Taylor Converse sneakers in low cut blacks. I wanted to hear the squeaking of the bouncing of the ball, the squeaking of the sneakers. And then they started this whole thing where they felt like they had to make it, and maybe it's better. I don't know. It isn't necessarily better for me, but when they absolutely bombard your senses, but with all of this noise, like you said, you don't even know you're at a basketball game. Hey, what's the score? I don't know.
It's all about the sponsors. It's all about, for God's sakes, the NFL, they play how many nights a week now? I heard that they're negotiating with the federal government to create an eighth day of the week just for them. They just play games all day long. I mean, it's like ridiculous. It's all big business. Forget it. It's not just about the cost of a ticket to get in, which is prohibitive to the average fan. The average fan can't go to a game anymore. To your
No,
point, you could go to any horse race and it costs you almost nothing to walk through the door, right?
it's free. Most places, free
Yes.
admission. Drinks are reasonable. They're not, clobbering over the head unless you're in certain areas. But yeah, the last game I attended, it had been a while. I mean, I used to go to every game, and we had to. I mean, we were
Yeah.
covering most of the stations I was at. They were the flagship for both the Dolphins and the Hurricanes at the time that I was there. So yeah, I was at every game. I was always involved in pregame and postgame shows, and in some cases play by play. But uh, I mean, so I went to like a zillion games, and then I just stopped going. The stadium locations being somewhat prohibitive. I don't really love driving on 95. Not like I'm an old geezer. I will get on there, but it's almost like being in the Ben-Hur movie. You're waiting for some kind of take a machete out, slash your tires while you're driving. But I went last year. I ended up in kind of a funny incident where a guy that I've had as a guest on many, many shows, a cat named Lynn Robbins out of New York. He was a long time college basketball and football writer for the New York Post. That's how I became familiar with him. And I used to have him on shows as a guest back when he was with the Post. And we remained friends. I always enjoyed having him on shows. He was a little bit different, much more avant-garde than most routine guests that you would have on the program. So he calls me one day and says, "Hey, my wife and I are coming down to South Florida, and she's never been to a major college football game. We'll be here in November, whatever it was. And if you could get us 2 tickets to the game, I'll pay for them forever and did it." So I'm looking on the schedule, and I'm thinking, okay, so who's playing? I was like Virginia Tech or something. I said, I'll be able to cop 2 tickets for this, no problem whatsoever. So then it cuts back to me later and said, "Oh, I gave you the wrong dates. It was like September something, September 20th or whatever." And sure enough, I look on the schedule. It's Miami against the Gators, when both teams early in the season were highly considered, and people didn't know that the Gators were going to collapse like they did, and they probably didn't know that Miami was going to go to the national championship game, but they had some anticipation. And look,
No, no, no,
the
Jeff.
numbers.
Jeff, let me just interrupt you for a second. I'm a Gator.
Yeah.
We knew the Gators were going to have a shitty season last year
Oh,
in
you did.
football. Oh, trust me, man. That coach was the worst thing we ever. I don't know how that guy ever got hired at the University of Florida, but that's neither here nor there. Go ahead.
So when you were at this game, because this was my most recent experience, and it had been a while since I'd actually gone to a major sporting event, and so sure enough, my friend ends up getting me tickets. I actually got the tickets through Tony Segreto, believe it or not, the great Tony Segreto.
Wow. Wow.
He gets me tickets for this guy, and I couldn't have been any more grateful. And they turned out to be like 45-yard line, lower ball, up a little ways from the field, perfect seat. You couldn't get a better seat for the game. All right, so I get back to my buddy. I said, I got the greatest news for you. I got the tickets. They're unbelievable. So now it's coming up to the weekend of the game. I haven't heard from this guy, Len Robbins, and I'm thinking, what if he's not coming? Then what do I do? I can't. The dilemma then is, do you scalp the freebie tickets for 1,500 a pop that you got from Segreto and tell him that you went? Or do you then run the risk that the guy who got the tickets, which was a guy named Hertz, who I think is a big shot with the Hurricane, like board of directors and alumni and all that. What if he's sitting next to somebody who bought the tickets off you that he gave you graciously through Segreto? So I couldn't afford to take that risk of running into the indignity of being caught scalping the tickets. And so I realized I was probably going to have to go to the game myself, because Len calls me and says he can't make it after all that. So I ended up going to the game with a friend of mine, $75 a part, like in what I call the Camelots, where there's still, there's no pavement. It's like sand. And you got to ride a camel across like this arid desert to get to the stadium.
Crazy.
My friend has all those measurements on his phone, because we walk together. We do our morning walk. The guy that went with me. And I mean, he has one of those phones that measures like your sperm count when you're exercising. It gives you everything. And we literally walked from these $75 parking spots a mile and a half each way to get to the stadium, which is a lot. I mean, imagine you're some old codger that, I mean, we're used to it because we walk every day, but you'd have been
It
worn
is
out.
it
It's
is
overdressed.
it is infringed into college sports. College sports is no
Yeah.
different. The players are getting paid more to stay in college and to go to the pros under certain conditions. If there's third, fourth, fifth round draft picks, are probably making more staying in college. So
Yeah.
it's just gotten out of control. It really has. And public governments. I mean, look, God bless them. Nothing wrong with the Moss family, but they got all this public land for nothing. For nothing.
Yes. Tore
Built
down
a
the old LG
stadium for a
Starport.
soccer team, got messy. Everybody got a, big Woody because they got Lionel Messi in town. So we said, yeah, here, take this public property, build a stadium. And oh, by the way, he's going to build hotels and restaurants and offices and, make a gazillion dollars. It's crazy, man. It's become business. Sports has become
That's always the plan. I mean, look at the Lawrence Sampson team. Somehow hoodwinked the city into giving them the most favorable stadium deal that probably has ever been on record. And for what? I mean, the team was direct when they were playing at what is now Hard Rock Stadium. There was
well,
no reason to believe they were going to get better.
and the beautiful part of that one with David Sampson is as soon as the contract allowed him to sell the team so he would reap the
Yes,
benefit of the stadium, the minute that happened, he sold the team like
that's how it
crazy.
always goes.
Yes,
Hey, even look
yes,
at the original Miami Arena. They were talking about, well, you know what, you put this, and that was like a $50 million thing.
yeah,
Which I mean, think about that for a second.
nothing.
Now you couldn't put up a 7-Eleven for 50 million now. So and it's in this blight of a neighborhood where people didn't necessarily feel safe. In fact, there were a couple of carjackings of people that were well known. Jan
Yes,
Stevenson and Sam Smith both had their cars jacked coming out of the arena there in the first year of the Miami Heat. And the rhetoric always is, well, we're going to improve the neighborhood, and all these poor kids are going to have parks, and they're going to have fiberglass backboards to play on, and there'll be schools built, and everything is going to be free. And if you go by there today, it looks exactly the same as it is, except for
hey,
the fact that the arena for 50 million has been torn down and is now probably a parking lot.
yeah, I mean, 50 million's nothing. I mean, listen, go back and if you go back and look, the Miami Heat promised they were going to build a bridge to Bayside Marketplace across that.
Yeah,
That bridge never got built. So
no, it never
what
gets.
happened with that? It's
Yeah.
like I don't know, whatever. It's a business now. It's just not quite the same to me. But
I think it's
like
always
you
been a
said,
business, but yeah, it's never been more. I mean, the fleecing of municipalities and the ridiculous deals that you would never make in a zillion years. Like if you knew that Bernie Madoff was running a Ponzi scheme, it's kind of like you signed with him after he was already arrested. And said, "Hey, Bernie, I got some money. You want to run it through the stock market for me?" Uh, the cities never win. They never do. I don't know what kind of. You're more familiar with politics than I am, with your brother and the way that you've been involved in this sort of thing. But I mean, the city will be swimming in a sea of red ink. That will be still, in deep water, even when Biscayne Bay is dry. So
listen, it's the same way. They do it every time, Jeff. They play on the emotions of the fans. The fans have a certain emotional level, and you tell them, "Hey, that team may move out of town," or "Oh, we got
yeah,
Lionel Messi now. We're going to be this great thing." It's
people love Messi. Look, that's been more than a benefit for the soccer team here. But what is it? Inter
in a
Miami CF. Yeah, I got
CFC.
the
Yeah,
CF backwards. Yeah, yeah, club football. Um,
yes.
yeah, Beckham was involved. You thought maybe they'd have success based on that. I don't know if they brought back Ray Hudson. Maybe that would have been nice. He was always a great character, and he's still really one of the top color announcers in the game. But I have zero interest in soccer, Andy. I really do. I respect guys. If you like the sport, that's fine. I'm never going to condemn
No,
you.
I
Look
know.
at how I'm talking boxing and horse racing here, but so I know those are two kind of niche sports. But soccer to me, the way I was introduced to it, it was punishment in gym class. So if somebody wouldn't, they would make you play soccer until somebody ratted out the guy who had graffitied the men's room at like my junior high school. And
Yes.
until
Yeah.
somebody talked and said, it was Charlie, you were playing soccer and it was torture.
It was
Meaningless running back and forth. I mean, pick up the ball and throw it, for God's sake. And, I don't know. I mean, all these people talk about the subtle nuances of the game. I can watch it once in a while in the World Cup. If you only saw, I mean, this may be true of football too. If you only saw the highlights, which were pared down to like 3 minutes worth of action,
Right.
soccer would be brilliant, man. When those guys do the bicycle kicks and the headers and all of this stuff. But not a game for me. So
No,
I would not be
it's
inclined to
always great to watch it on, Sports Center's top 10 plays. You see
yeah,
two or three
great.
great. But what's the excitement in a 1-0, game? I mean, it's just I don't get it
Straight.
either. I'm kind of with you on that one. But so Jeff, what else? What else is happening in Jeff DeForest? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the air, where we can find you. I've always loved listening to you, buddy, and I want to know where we can do that.
A while back, after we got blown out of 940 in favor of the very popular Brady Quinn morning show, which I don't know if anybody's doing the thing they used to talk about. Hey, standing by the cooler, water cooler there at work, and they're talking about Brady Quinn when he sit on there. No idea. I'm probably the only guy that ever lost a starting job to Brady Quinn, who was, of course, the quarterback that everybody wanted in that Coco Cameron draft, where everybody's chanting Quinn, 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 and they drafted Ted Ginn Jr., who, to tell you the truth, I mean, in hindsight, had a far superior career to Brady Quinn. So that was a good move by the Dolphins, even though everybody despised it at the time. But
Yes.
so I got involved in various video streaming enterprises, and I have to say, with a lot of ups and downs and a mixed bag of success. So currently, now we have this thing called South Florida Live, where my partner for many years on the radio at 940, Mike Lubie Lubitz, he had the very unique voice. And he was psychotic about the Miami Dolphins draft, saying that they blew it again. And we do a show every morning from 8 to 9, talking about all different things, but mostly we concentrate on the local sports scene because that's the following that we have on South Florida Live. And right now, I'm trying to navigate my way into this other guy's system. I do a thing on a platform that was known as Bleacher Brothers, now known as Q&A Sports. And so I just finished up something with those guys, and we're going to go heavily into, believe it or not, coverage of Florida Atlantic University on that
Oh,
site,
great.
which they're drawing phenomenal numbers for a thing called Owl Watch. So in a never-ending effort to capitalize on that, we'll be doing a lot of FAU stuff on that platform. And then I'm involved in one other project that I'm really hoping comes to pass. I had to send this guy a bunch of stuff. He didn't really know me or my work. And I sent him a bunch of stuff yesterday, and this would be the Bobby Thompson shot heard around the world if I can sign on with this and it goes. So we'll see. But a lot of ups and downs. A lot of these streaming services that you're thinking you're having great success with, all of a sudden just disappear. It happened with me with a thing called Caffeine TV, where I was involved with a platform called NoFilter.net. It was brought about by people who thought they would provide a platform for people who had been eliminated from their careers by political correctness. So you had guys like Jeremy Reneke, Tony Bruno, a lot of different
Wow.
people that had said things that went against the grain. And they were doing shows on this NoFilter.net, which still exists. I was doing shows on there until very recently, but from a monetary standpoint, it wasn't working. But they were affiliated with this Caffeine TV, and you would have shows that got like 200,000, 250,000 views on one show, which you would think would be a sellable number. And just as that was sort of rolling, we get the news that it just came as like a flash, like we're going out of business. This was a company that was funded by Paramount and had like major executives involved that had been very successful in other platforms and media before streaming became popular. And just at the height of that, they disappeared. So there have been a lot of deflating moments. I'm not ashamed to admit that through no fault of what you're doing, but you have to keep trying because the stuff I sent this guy yesterday was stuff I did basically for free about a half a year ago. And, Tommy mentioned it, it was a show where we put together where we have the winning jockey to Preakness on before the race and stuff like that. So it was very beneficial. It happened while I was talking to this guy. He mentioned that he was a big fan of Jim Lampley, the boxing announcer.
Yes.
And I just happened to have a show with Jim Lampley that I sent him. So I'm thinking if this doesn't convince him that I'm worthy of whatever it is that he's going to overpay the people on this network, then I just don't have it anymore, Andy. So
Well,
we'll
I'll
see.
tell you what, man, good luck with that. I I mean, I don't know how many times you got fired in your career, but everyone that I met that was really great. I mean, you listen to Howard Stern talks about it all the time on the air,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
times he got fired. I mean, I was such a pussy, Jeff. I didn't have, you know what I mean? I just didn't, I don't know that I could take that type of rejection. So I just never went in that route in the radio business. I
Yeah.
revere guys like you that have been through the wars and been smacked around a little bit, but you kept coming back, and we kept love to listen to you, well, no matter where you are. So
You always wanted to have something overlapping. I mean, that was a big key in being a talent. I was lucky. I always had some kind of TV affiliation going when I was doing radio.
yeah,
So if one dried up, it was temporary. I still had a job, which was always good. You're going to get fired by a variety of circumstances. I mean, it doesn't really have any big reflection on you or your talent. I mean, some guys get fired because they stink, but yeah, I mean, it's going to happen.
right.
You can't avoid it. Formats change, management changes, stations get sold, they have different approaches. So it's going to happen. I was very fortunate. The perception was that because pretty much went from left to right on your radio dial during the course of my 45 years here in South Florida, starting all the way down to one end at 560 and going all the way up to like 1470, and a lot of stops in between. Then I got fired a lot, but the truth was I almost always left for a more advantageous situation.
Yeah.
So it might have been one or two times. I know I would say I got canned like two times maybe outright, and that's out of a dozen different jobs. So not too bad. I usually had a pretty long run. It wasn't like I got the job and 2 months later they said, "Hey, you got to go." So inevitable consequence of the business, and you always have to be, this, anticipating your next move.
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate as well this last one as I probably should have, but yeah, I'm paying a little bit of a price for that, but hopefully it'll be rectified soon.
Well, listen, thanks for coming today to Miami's Man Cave. I really do appreciate you being here. It's great to see you, old friend, Jeff
Yeah.
DeForest. And good luck this weekend with the Derby. I'm sure you're going to be cashing in a big ticket. What was it again? The 5 horse bot
Five horse, $1 trifecta box.
trifecta box. 5 horse.
Trifecta box. You get two throwouts, and the other three have to be 1, 2, and 3 in any order. And so it gives you a little bit. In other words, let's say you think Renegade really belongs in the money because he's the best horse in the race, even with the compromised post position. You can throw him in there, but then you're hoping that he doesn't hit the trifecta ticket. So then your payoffs go up exponentially. It's like if the favorite's off the board, it's going to be a big score. But I've hit that a couple of times, and I've had a lot of success in general in the Triple Crown races with the one guy I partner up with. We've probably cashed about $25,000 worth of tickets over the years without really risking all that much. So it's good.
Wow.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Super Bowl of Degeneracy, Andy Corge. Get
Yeah,
involved.
you got the Puma in your list or no?
I'm throwing them in. Yes.
Yeah, I think he
Just
had
recently.
kind of a rocky road trip that last time, and it lost by a nose to Commandment in the Florida Derby. So
Was right there in the mix. Yeah, those three favorites were right there, 1, 2, 10. I happened to be watching a race with a friend who had a big investment in Puma, and ended up hating me because he thought I jinxed him because the horse somehow ended up third and it fell out of the exacta. But how is that horse not in there with a fighting chance? Somebody just bought a piece of him too that always likes to be involved in the Derby for NASCAR. It's the Puma, yeah, racing out of the 9-hole. Definitely have to throw him in there. Javier Castellano in the boot.
yep,
So,
and I think Further Ado is too far outside. I
Further-
don't think there's been a horse pass outside the 16 hole that
well-
has won.
Well, that is
Yeah.
the Comcast guy. That was he liked the other one he liked was Further
Yeah,
Ado.
but outside of 16, they've never won out there.
yeah, you may have to change cable systems. And get Xfinity.
Get one
Depending on
with
how this
some,
guy's two horses do. Yeah.
get one that has better gamblers associated
Yes.
with it.
Yeah.
Would be
Yeah.
good. I'd
Yeah.
like that.
But
Well-
nobody's wrong until the race is run. So we'll see.
That's true. All right, Jeff. Well, great seeing you, buddy. Come back
Great being with
anytime.
you.
Oh, by the way, if you come into the studio, we have a parting gift of Goo Gone. So you always get a goo
Really?
gone. Yeah, you take this and your goo is always gone. So just want to let you know in case you ever want to come by and visit us and get your passport and come down to Miami-Dade County. Yep.
Yeah, that's been a long time, my friend, but it'll be an honor, man. It was great catching up with you, Annie and Tommy. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You too, buddy. We'll see you soon in Miami's Man Cave. Thanks. See you later.